Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. This is going to be a good one. We have New York's first female whiskey sommelier. It's Heather Greene and her new book called Whisky, Distilled. Well, Heather, welcome to Anderson's in Naperville.
Thank you. What a beautiful town this is.
Well, thank you. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
This is so exciting. This book is literally not even been out 2 weeks, though, right? Or
no,
less.
not even out.
Not even
You're
2
right.
weeks. Yeah.
It has not been out for 2 weeks yet.
So your debut book is out in the world, this baby. So how does it feel? And what are you hearing from friends, family, and colleagues?
I feel nervous. Okay.
Yeah,
So
right.
as a first-time author, there's a lot of jitters, you know, from speaking engagements to how will people respond to the book or what I've written. Will they get what I was hoping they would get from the book?
Right.
A lot of that stuff.
Yeah. So you're hearing from some whiskey connoisseurs that you know who think they know everything. That you're hearing a little bit of that.
Yeah, actually, some of them they've been nicer than I thought they would be.
Good.
I think,
Good.
yeah, I anticipated. I think I feared a lot more
Sure.
than actually happened. I anticipated this kind of when I was writing it. There were, you imagine the Tea Party and all these imaginary villains are there to tell you all the things you're doing wrong as you're writing the book, and there's less than I thought. So that's nice.
Cool, good. So what was that germ or that little spark that made you want to sit down and write, put all this incredible knowledge you have about whiskey and this incredible spirit to write this book as a guide for people who probably don't know a whole lot, you know? Yeah.
Well, I've always been pretty creative by nature before I did this. I have records out, and that requires sitting down and writing as well, and writing lyrics and putting things together. And I feel like writing a book comes from that same space.
Sure.
And it just, I don't know, it just felt like the right thing to do, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So when did that love of whiskey, or maybe that first taste that you had, and what was that experience like, and what leading to this career that you've had by becoming an incredible expert on this spirit?
Well, I've tasted whiskey my whole life. The book opens with an experience of me, my first swig in a bottle that was spiked when I was young, and how it scared me and all that kind of stuff.
I like the grass part of that, though.
Yes, yeah, the grass part people seem to remember. I won't reveal anymore.
No,
we want to buy the book.
No, we have to buy the book. You have to read that story yourself. Right?
But when I really was thinking to myself, there's really something in here. That's when I lived in Scotland.
Okay.
And I had a taste of, I remember what it was. It was called Cragganmore's Distillers Edition, and I just it just gave me this. I was in Scotland. It was a rainy, wistful day, and then you drink this beautiful liquid that's from there that kind of feels like a rainy, wistful day, and it was the time and place, and it just kind of clicked, and I thought, wow, there's something in here.
Yeah. So what took you to Scotland? And you were in Edinburgh when you were working there. Is that?
Yeah, I was in Edinburgh. I lived. My husband was in graduate school at the University of Edinburgh.
Okay. Okay. Wow.
That's how that happened. He said, you need something to do. I was a musician as well. I was touring, but I went out drinking.
Okay. So where did your education begin? Was it that first taste, or when did it really begin, that this love and this knowing so much about whiskey and all of its different forms?
Well, it's like sort of phase 1 and phase 2.
Okay.
I mean, phase 1 happened while I was working in restaurants in New York, and you're required to like nose and taste and know your wines and your whiskeys. And I like whiskey. That's pretty good. But it wasn't until I was in Scotland that I started working at the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, where it just really blossomed. You're just immersed in this beautiful world, and you start to really appreciate the craftsmanship and the terroir and the beauty of casking and how wood gives flavor to a whiskey, and how many distillers are operating in Scotland, and each one with its own character. I mean, it's pretty fascinating, actually.
No, it really is. And I think there's such a history to it. There's such a tradition to it.
There's tradition, there's story, there's mystery, I think there's magic in it. There's something about, people ask me if there's a way you can, for example, accelerate aging. And you can't. No one's been able to do it yet. There is something about Father Time and the terroir that's going to lend that beauty to the spirit.
Yeah. So people have heard of wine sommeliers, those experts about wine. But being a spirits sommelier, and you are the first woman in New York to become a whiskey. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have actually, even in the Chicago area, you have a woman named Monique Houston. Do you know her?
You know what? I've heard of her. I've never met her, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. She is also she was also a whiskey sommelier, and she's very big in the whiskey world. But yeah, it's in New York, the first.
Yeah. Oh, that is so cool. So tell us how the process to become a whiskey sommelier. How does that work?
Well, actually, it's really about understanding more the definition of a sommelier, which is really a job rather than sort of this credential where you pass all these tests.
Right.
So in the wine world, you have options to pass these tremendous exams to become a master sommelier. We don't have that in whiskey. So, and what happened was I was working as a sommelier would in a restaurant, and we just really struggled with what do we call what I'm doing.
Yeah, okay.
And so you look up the etymology of sommelier, which I go over in the book, and actually just pretty much means butler. And so that seemed to fit. I was bringing whiskey to tables.
Yeah, but you knew what you were talking about. Yeah.
I did know what I was talking about,
Yeah. So as the first American woman to serve on the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, and that's a tasting panel in Edinburgh. Wow, what did that feel like to be, the first American, woman to sit on this board? Because I've heard so much about this board.
That's cool. Well, at the time, you don't really know you're making whiskey history or you're doing anything spectacular. My friend, a friend wasn't able to do it, and somebody else said, do you want to sit in? And there you go. And I just used my language that I knew from wine and translated that over to whiskey, and it just kind of happened.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, being the first woman, and I think when you think of, especially in Scotland, and you think of the traditions and the centuries of Scotch whiskey distilling, and you think of men. Did you ever get any resistance from men being a woman in this field, whether here in New York in the States or in Scotland, or did you ever feel that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that just comes with the territory. If you're amongst the first to be in a room filled with people that have traditionally held that space, then you have a little bit of an outsider status. And with that comes good and with bad. Sometimes there's been some resistance or some snarky remarks or some disrespect. But on the other hand, being an outsider has afforded some interesting opportunities and also really a perspective that I think is new and fresh. And that's what I tried to communicate in my book.
Now, talking about the difference between men and women's sense of smell, I think women have a better sense of smell in some way.
Over and over again, it has been proven that women have a better sense of smell, yes.
So that would be a huge plus. I mean, and the way you can, because smelling, the olfactory senses are very important in whiskey, not just wine, but of course but I would think that being a woman in this field would be a real big plus just from that one standpoint.
Well, I think that it is a plus, but I also think it just points to the importance of having women and be a part of the conversation. To layer the complexity over the conversation is really important. So questions I ask, and we're not there yet, is that, would, for example, rating scales change if it was really 50-50, like 50 women and 50 men judging a whiskey? I don't know. So right now, the whole conversation and how these judging panels are conducted or reviews, there's a lot of traditional rating scales of, like 95, rating. Would it change? I don't know.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
We don't know yet, but it could.
So you explain in the book, whiskey, in Scotland they don't have an E, and they don't use it in Japan, I think.
They don't use it in Japan, and they don't use it in Scotland, and many countries that create whiskey based on that Scottish style would not use the E.
Okay, but
so
they do
Ireland
in Ireland
and America.
America, that's so interesting. So, so you are the director of whiskey education.
Yes, at the Flatiron Room.
At the Flatiron Room. Tell us what you do in that capacity, and when you hold your classes for novices like us. What do you do when you hold a class?
That's a good question, because I started out with this idea that there would be all these different kinds of classes, but what the team at the Flatiron Room and I have discovered is that Whiskey 101 is just the biggest sellout class.
Yeah.
There's such a demand for it that we've started just running it weekly. And in that class, I take whiskey from around the world, major representations of whiskey from major whiskey producing regions of the world, and I take students through that and tell them that each dram or each whiskey is really a lens to a whole nother world. So if you like bourbon, that's a whole world. If you like single malt Scotch, that's a whole world. If you like Japanese whiskeys, that's a whole world. So I kind of give you a taste of it all and give you the lingo and kind of introduce yourself. You introduce students to this sense of, you know, the olfaction that we seem to have kind of maybe lost touch with a little bit.
Yeah, right.
Dogs don't.
Right.
I watch my dog. He's very, very connected to his sense of smell.
Very true. You know, wine for a long time has been a big hobby, people collecting bottles and that sort of thing. But it's so interesting to see the growth of craft breweries across the United States, even in, you know, a community like ours where, you know, we have several. But but now seeing that how the classic cocktails are making a comeback and spirits are making a comeback and having the right bar in your home. And it's so cool to see traditional drinks and drinking it, you know, not even mixed, and you have some great cocktail recipes in the book for this.
Yes, thank
but
you.
it's all sort of come back, and I think people are learning so much more. What do you think has caused all this renewal and growth in not only in distilleries but in the interest in this and wanting to learn more and taste some really wonderful things?
I've thought about this a lot. It's a question, you know, a lot of people are asking, like, what's happening with this resurgence? And I think there's a lot of things. I think you mentioned one, which is the whole mixology or the cocktail movement. Great bartenders taking this wily spirit with lots of aromatics and is kind of difficult to wrestle with and make something beautiful out of it. So we have all these new palettes being introduced to whiskey. I think that some people say it's the Mad Men effect, you know, Don Draper, who really popularized that whiskey drinking in his TV show. But I also think that people are so interested in what kind of a local movement of food enjoyment. That's on my food enjoyment and local wine making and craft distilling, and it's what we do in America. We make whiskey.
So what do you think, you know, writing this book and trying to dispel some of those biggest misconceptions about whiskey in general? What are some of those biggest ones you think people have about whiskey in general?
Well, first, there's a lot of myths and rules that people just come to the table with all the time, and, you know, people yell at me for putting ice in my whiskey. You know, it's fine to put ice in your whiskey. Whiskey's dynamic; the flavor will change, and you know, I teach you in the book how to decide when and when not to use ice in a whiskey. I think there's a myth that older is always better. That's not the case, which I also describe in the book why. And really how different flavors develop during the entire aging process. So younger whiskeys are going to have different profiles than older ones. That's a big myth. That women can't drink it. That's another one. Or women don't drink it.
Right.
But they do.
I'm sure in a lot of the classes that you hold and what you see, and this book I think is going to introduce a lot of women, because you as a woman I think are opening that door for a lot of women thinking about whiskey and thinking about. But I think it's so interesting to see the change in how women are approaching different things to eat, thinking that was just a man's world, or you know, that they weren't going to drink that sort of thing. So I'm sure you've seen a lot more women coming to your classes.
Yeah, a lot more women have come, and they actually started coming to my classes even before the book came out. So they started coming out, I'd say, you know, I started really seeing women getting interested probably about 4 years ago. 10 years ago, not at all. And I'd say about 3 or 4 years ago, we started to see this resurgence, or I started to see a changing demographic of people coming to my classes.
So I don't know how many years ago, but I stated, I don't know if I read it in the book or I read it on another fact about distilleries have grown tremendously in the United States. You know, maybe going back a few years, there may have been only 69 distilleries, you know, that were making not just whiskey but other things. But now there's close to 400.
Yes,
there's a lot. And so thinking about whiskey in general and different types of whiskey, are there any really good distilleries? Because you talk about it doesn't have to be old to be good.
No.
So there's a lot of new distilleries that are probably distilling some really wonderful spirits. So are there any you can name that you really particularly like?
Well, I mean, I really am a big advocate of getting in your car. Well, getting somebody to drive your car, getting your car with somebody who doesn't drive.
Right.
But exploring what some of the new local craft distillers are doing near wherever you live and supporting them. So, you know, near my house, we've got, you know, in Brooklyn, we have Kings County Distillery, and upstate New York, we have Tuttletown Distillery, there's New York Distilling, there's all these like wonderful things, and you can easily find that anywhere, like whether in Michigan or Illinois or California online, super easy.
Right, yeah. So there's so many different types, and I think this is what people don't know about, you know, whether it's bourbon or it's Irish whiskey or it's Scotch whiskey, or, you know, it's rye, which rye is you know, it really made a comeback, you know, rye with a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but then, you know, Kentucky Straight, whatever you call it, your book is a great way of, I love the charts, and a lot of this are really good. So where should a beginner begin if they don't know what they like?
Well, the first thing is just to understand, and a lot of people get confused by this, that whiskey is an umbrella term. So under that you have Japanese whiskeys, you have Irish whiskeys, you have Scotch whiskey, you have American whiskeys, and then, you know, each one of those categories breaks down.
Right.
So American whiskey would be like rye and bourbon, among others. You have single malt Scotch, blended Scotch, there's a lot there. So, the first thing I would do is you get those major producing regions like Japan, Ireland, United States, Scotland, and to have a friend or two, and I teach you about this in the book, like you can go to the bar and order two and split it, and kind of you start experimenting between something like a Scottish whiskey and a bourbon, and then very immediately one of you is going to say, I like the Scotch or I like the bourbon. You just start really simply there, and you start to sort of understand your own palate.
Yeah. And in the book, there's some great photographs too to show some of the mixed drinks and stuff in there. What, you know, a lot of people think, oh, I have to drink Scotch straight up, or just on the rocks, or neat, or whatever you call it. But there's a lot of great cocktails for different types of whiskeys.
Yes, I'm glad you enjoy that section.
Right.
That was really fun to make.
Yeah.
There are, what we did was the bartenders at the Flatiron Room and I got together and we just started playing with different whiskeys and different aromatics from them, and then explore cocktail making around those particular aromatics. And what's really fun is you start to see the development of these cocktails and the use of some of the ingredients that the bartenders use that I feel were chosen based on their own background. So Amant is his name. He is a bartender from India. And so you see Darjeeling tea in his whiskey cocktails, and cardamom and spice and all that kind of stuff. And excuse me, Alex Valencia is from Mexico, and you just see this kind of vibrancy and this big, bold fruits and color in his cocktail. So that was fun.
Yeah, well, that sounds really good. But the food pairings, you know, you can really make the enjoyment of what particular type of whiskey that you're drinking and how some go better with others. But I love the food pairings because it sounds like just a great way to spend an evening, you know.
Oh, yeah, especially before the holidays.
Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure. I love that part of it. There was a movie that was out not too long ago. My youngest daughter, who I told you is at St. Andrews, mentioned and we watched. It was great. It's called The Angel's Share.
Oh yeah, what a great movie!
It was such a good movie. Is that really how, say, a rare barrel of Scotch in Scotland would go for something like that? And that you, as you know, a sommelier, would know what really that really is that whiskey. I mean, can you get it down to that finite taste?
I hope so. I mean, I've never been tested like that. I hope so. No one's ever, you could ever say for sure. And I certainly do enough practicing to know. But there are rare whiskeys out there.
It was an interesting film just to see that part of it and how that the industry works in Scotland. So what would be the best advice besides getting the book? They have to get the book to find out about how to really become sort of a little expert on your own. But what is the best advice to give a novice when you're just starting this out? And maybe you're not even sure if you like any types of whiskey.
Well, as I said, I think a great way to start out is find a friend or one other person and just go to your local pub and order a bourbon and a Scotch, like I said, and just each of you take a taste of it and just trust your own palate, and if you think to yourself something like, I don't like it, that's okay, or I think I could like it, you want to nose through the ABV and really get at those aromatics. So I guess very quickly, I think it's just a matter of getting into that mindset of whiskey. It's not like wine, so you are dealing with 40% ABV. You want to nose through that to get all the beautiful aromatics, but they're in there.
Okay. I know on the book you have some great quotes for some people. Anthony Bourdain.
Yes, I felt like when Anthony Bourdain gave me the quote, I could rest.
I think you could. But I love the Nick Offerman one because we know as Ron Swanson on Parks and Rec, and he grew up not far from here.
Oh, really?
So we had an event with him.
All of them were just, Eric Ripert is just this unbelievable chef, and I was very lucky to get Jim Meehan. Of course, you probably sell his book, the PDT cocktail book. So I was very chuffed, as they say in the UK.
Yeah. So what was the experience of writing the book? Did it take you long to organize the whole thing? And because you make it so enjoyable, because you add so many other stories, not just to the facts about what all of this means. But was it fun? I mean, was it a different type of experience? Because as you're a musician and also as this other career that you've created, and it must have been very different to sit down and write instead of just talk about
it. Was different. It was very different. And I actually had a lot of fun. I actually loved being, I liked being a writer this year. I liked waking up, having a cup of coffee, and then thinking about how I would write about whiskey. The first 2 attempts were kind of miserable, and those are the first 2 drafts, and you keep working at it. But to get that effortless, friendly tone without dummying down the topic, it was actually really challenging because you get too technical and you have to pull back, but you don't want, it's not a whiskey book for dummies by any means.
Right,
it's actually, there's a lot of complicated concepts in there. But it was fun. I forced myself to write 500 words a day. And so I didn't look at the top of the mountain from the bottom of the mountain because I would just go to sleep with stress. I just said, today, write 500 words. Tomorrow, I'll read, and then pretty soon you have a 65,000 word book.
Any tasting while you were writing?
Absolutely.
I think that would probably put you in the mood for writing the book. So you're a musician, a vocalist, and a keyboardist, and you've been doing that for a long time. So tell me how that part of your life, has melded with now being an author and becoming, this sommelier for whiskey and everything.
Well, I now know more about what the synergies are now than I did before writing the book, and that was part of the working with the Monell Institute, or the Monell Chemical Senses Center down in Philadelphia, and they're the kind of the think tank for olfaction. And when people are nosing, it is a sensual experience. It's something that a certain part of your brain turns on, and it's that creative part. It's not the part that is analytical and language based. And I think music comes from that same space. So for me, it's easier to operate, I think, there than the other parts.
Right.
That's my guess.
So tell us about Mrs. Roberts. Now I know she was 110 when she passed away.
She was 110 years old. Apparently, she had a dram of whiskey a day. She was she was the oldest relative for William when I worked at William Grant & Sons.
Okay.
And that was when I first started dabbling in women in whiskey. When I still worked for William Grant & Sons, I was the ambassador to Glenfiddich, and we had this idea that we would start the Mrs. Roberts Society for women who really like Scotch. So that was the first time that I've worked with a company kind of to talk about it.
And you started that in Scotland, so.
I actually started that in New York.
Oh, you started in New York.
Yes.
So how many members do you have to your women's?
Oh, well, now we don't really do that. Now I don't work for Glenfiddich anymore, and when I left, I became whiskey in general. But all Mrs. Roberts fans are welcome.
Oh, that's wonderful. So what do you hope readers will take away from Whiskey Distilled, this book?
I want readers to feel comfortable, confident. I want them to feel happy to walk into a bar or restaurant and know what they enjoy and to enjoy it. That's really what I just want people to enjoy whiskey and enjoy the process of reading it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I end these interviews with a little quiz, so no pressure.
Okay.
You'll know all the answers. So, and some of them are book related, some of them are whiskey related. Okay. All right.
I'm nervous.
This is okay. No. Okay. Do you remember a favorite book when you were young? Something you liked to read?
Yes.
Okay. What was that book?
The Little House.
Okay.
I love that book so much.
What is your favorite distillery? Do you have I know that's hard. You
No,
can't
it's
say.
not. I don't even have, I can't because it's like wine. There's
Okay,
like
all right.
different, it's like occasion. So I would pick a certain whiskey distillery based on the weather or rain or summer.
Okay.
That's the truth.
Okay, what about your favorite cocktail? That whiskey is the main component.
That's easy. I would say that I'm a real traditionalist, so I love an old-fashioned.
Okay, okay. And how about a whiskey drink or a particular type of whiskey that maybe is associated with somebody famous that you enjoy?
Associated
Could be an author or anybody.
Famous. Oh. I don't know.
Oh, that's okay. There's probably a lot of them, but...
Well, you know, I don't know who drank what. I mean, of course, there's always the Frank Sinatra-Jack Daniels relationship, which is super fun.
That is fun. Okay, what about the most expensive Scotch you've ever tasted?
I tasted a Scotch. Well, actually, I would say a priceless Scotch. They're ones that are tapped right out of a cask in the back of the distillery that are so old they'll never be bottled.
Right.
I would say that.
Oh,
Priceless.
nice.
Never to be sold.
Okay. Which whiskeys do you like? From what area? Scotland? Or is this is another one you have to ask? I'm thinking it might be Scotland. But say Irish whiskey, Japanese, or American. Which ones do you tend to gravitate to?
Well, again, it's as I talk about in my book, it's season. So the other night somebody said, if you were about to die, what would be your favorite whiskey? I'm like, well, where is it? And what time of year? And how is this happening? It's really about occasion. And so if you think about it, like when you're drinking wine, if you're having a picnic in the summer, you're probably going to pick a rosé, maybe from Provence. So if it's the summer and I'm having a picnic and someone said, okay, you're going to drink a whiskey, I might throw some Irish whiskey or a beautiful light Japanese whiskey like the Hibiki 12 on ice.
Okay.
So if it is Thanksgiving and I'm really full, but I ate a lot of food, but I want just a little something still, I might sip on something like a Balvenie 21 Portwood, which has like raisins and fig and chocolate and spice, and it's deep and rich. So
okay. So it depends on the moment and the time and the weather.
That was a long-winded way of saying exactly that.
And the food would be sort of part of that.
Exactly. Absolutely. What you had beforehand always matters.
Okay. And what is your favorite toast?
Oh, like, you mean...
any toast or just any, it could be a Scottish toast, an Irish toast, any toast, an English toast.
It's too long to say, but my favorite is actually by what I call him the Irish superhero, Tullamore Tim. It's in the Irish whiskey chapter, and it's the Irreverent Lord's Prayer. Reverent Lord's Prayer, kind of infused with whiskey speak.
Oh, nice. Yes. Okay.
I have
to learn that one.
Yeah, it's really long, but it's pretty funny.
Okay.
I could read it for you.
Okay. Well, Heather, thank you so much, and congratulations on
Whiskey
so much
Distilled.
No, I can't wait to read more of it and to try my hand at a little bit more tastings of that. So cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me. Thanks. What a spirited conversation we just had with Heather Greene about her new book. She's New York's first female whiskey sommelier. It's called Whiskey Distilled. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.